Alrighty, so LSIs today. We're going to talk about LSIs. I keep mentioning the LSIs in a few examples, um, but here it is. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so LSIs. TI base, TE ignoring. Let's talk about the differences. TI is interested in creating a set of principles in which to operate by. It's about creating a consistent set of principles. That way, one has a approach in how they make decisions. Whereas TE is focused on keeping things open-ended, making the most efficient decision, the most practical one. Whereas obviously back to TI, it's more so about remaining logically consistent. So, and having a set of principles. So for LSI, they're going to do this quite naturally. Forming that set of consistent principles is pretty natural to them, and one of the ways I've seen it work best, or just one of the ways I've seen it work for them pretty well, is within like organizations. They do a really good job of knowing, like, of having this system in place, and then knowing where they need to put their efforts at what times. That's something that I've noticed with them. They're pretty good at. Like, they recognize what the system needs. They recognize like I'm thinking in a work environment. Like there's a procedure that's got to happen. They're pretty good at knowing what needs to happen and what they need to do within that system to contribute to the goal, to that outcome. They're pretty good at maintaining systems, and what I mean by that is just knowing like what they need to do to ensure that that system or framework is operating as it should be. So that's a big part of them. Sorry if you heard that. Anyways, that's pretty big part of the LSIs. They are pretty focused on how they use their language. When they speak, it's very, very precise. They're very focused on ensuring their words are as precise as possible. And one of the reasons for this is that this type doesn't have very good extrovert intuition. So because of that, they can't imply to know what you mean by something. Like they can't just be like, oh, this is what they mean by this. Like you should just say what you mean. And then like they can't sit there and survey and be like, what could this person mean by all these things? No, they're not going to be very good at that. And so for them, you better just explain yourself really damn well. Now, what was another thing I was going to say? Pretty good at maintaining systems. Yeah, I'd say they're pretty good at like being forceful too. I'd say they're like a little bit scarier than like an SE base, because an SE base has a relaxed human nature to them. Like, I don't know how to put this, but I've always kind of like admired SE bases in a way. Like they're very childlike, right? They see the world in a very like in a very straightforward way. And for them, like they want to have fun. They want to do things. They want to like push their limits, test their limits, their boundaries. They want to get out and like engage in activity. They want intensity. They're attracted by like the really fun big things. And like, I know that's like probably an oversimplification of an SE type, but I don't know. There's a very childlike nature to them, because like for someone like me, I'm childlike in a whole different sense. Like for me, I don't care about those kinds of things, and I don't give them a lot of attention, and so those things don't excite me per se. I do enjoy them, but they don't pull me. They don't. There's not like there's a thing that could happen, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to do this. I don't really have that pull towards those things. And so because of the way they are, because they engage in things like that, it's to me it's this endearing childlike type of behavior, and I appreciate it. Whereas LSIs, they're a little bit more intense. They're not really the TI comes first. So they're pretty their FE is not that great. So they're pretty cold, pretty I mean they're not always cold, but I think their general mode of operating is pretty straightforward, pretty logical. I think that the thing is they're very whoa, I spaced out. Sorry. Yeah, so they're pretty logical, they're pretty straightforward, but then they'll be really aggressive when they need to. I think what happens is the LSI is pretty aware of how things are affecting one another in the environment. So what do I mean by this? Well, your demonstrative is information that you're aware of, but it's not information that you like care about doing for its own sake. So for example, the information that SI would be about is about how objects are affecting one another in the environment, right? And so the agenda of SI is about harmonizing. It's about doing things in a way that like affect other things. Like there's not too much of an influence or effect on other things in the environment. So like an SE base is going to be aware of the how things are affecting the environment, but they are not interested in the subtleties of that. Like they're more so just about spreading that influence, spreading that impact on the environment. So for them, it's more focused from like expanding their own influence and creating that effect. And so it's competing for space. Whereas with SI types, it's oftentimes it's about reducing space. It's about allowing everything to work in its own right without disturbing it in any way. And oftentimes I think about like the picture I get in my head as like a really rudimentary example is like I could walk through the room in such a way that someone's washing dishes or something, and I come too close to them, and then like it affects them, and they like stop and like look around or whatever. Or I could walk around the room in such a way that they don't even notice me, and whatever they're doing, they continue to do, and I haven't impacted them in the environment. And that's like a very basic example, but that's like that's essentially what SI would be wanting to do, is not having much of an impact on that. LSIs are very aware of how everything in the environment's affecting each other, but they are looking at the outcome. They're translating that introvert sensation information back to NI. That's where their values are at. So they're aware of how everything's affecting one another in the environment, but what they're interested in is the vision, the goal, the outcome, the important thing, right? And so for because of that, that introverted sensation information is going to go right back to SE, and they're gonna say, well, this is what needs to happen, and so they'll likely affect the environment in just the right way as to make that goal happen. So that's something that you'll see with them, and it's really intense. Like they're aware of how things affect the environment, and because of that, they can be really intense, and but it's all for the purpose of ensuring that goal, that end outcome. Obviously, that TISE is going to be really focused on ordering people, information, whatever it may be. This kind of intensity is really helpful for the EIE, who's pretty sporadic, all over the place, emotional. That LSI like intensity of like laying down like they're very aware of like boundaries and again how things are affecting one another, and so they're pretty good disciplinarians, you know. They're pretty good. Like I it's funny because I'm thinking right now of this movie I watched recently. Man, you know what I'm gonna have to do? I'm sorry. I wish I had gotten this guy's name before I started recording. But what I'm going to do is I am going to go get this guy's name so that you can watch clips of him on YouTube. I'll put like a clip down below. There's this guy that in this movie that is such an LSI, like such an LSI. It's just it's hilarious, and I think that watching that movie will make you laugh. So that's the LSIs are pretty intense. I've noticed like there was this time, and this is gonna sound pretty ridiculous because uh I saw this couple come in, and I was pretty sure they were like LSI EIE couple, you know. Um, but I was like at a restaurant or something, right? And like the wife was like really like expressive and like I don't even know how to put it. Like she was just very like emotionally expressive. And she came in, and the guy was just kind of scouting the place out. He was kind of looking around, you know. He's like, and I was like, this guy is kind of like weird, right? But then like she ordered the food, and he was like getting like sauce and stuff like that, and like, and then like I went across the room to do something because like I worked at this place, so I was going across the room to like refill like napkins or something like that, and I walked around the corner, and I was still a pretty good distance from him. I'd say I was like, I'm really bad at measuring distance. I don't know, like I was probably like right here, and he was probably like over here. And right when I wasn't even walking his direction, I was walking behind, like close to behind him, and I remember he was like grabbing sauce, and he goes, and he was like, and he's like snapped his attention to me, and he like kept his eyes on me, and like he just made eye contact. It was really intense, and like he was very aware of his environment and stuff like that. I don't know. You guys might laugh at me for making that kind of typing judgment on these random people, but it's just like stereotypical like LSI like EIE type of thing. Um, but the thing is, you know, it's it's that scary type of like intense character as an LSI is very it's very common. I mean, not all of them are like that. I know an LSI that's actually pretty charming, but he obviously is not very social. He doesn't really give a lot of attention to the making like any kind of emotional impact or anything like that. But he is very he's a very nice guy. It's not that they're all intense, but he does carry weight. Like this other one that I'm talking about walks through the room and everyone notices, and like he's kind of like it's kind of hard to explain, but just like everyone knows he's like, I mean he is the boss where I'm talking about, but there are other bosses, and none of them carry as much weight as he does, and that's kind of he really does make a really intense impact on the environment, even though he's generally a nice guy. So not all of them are like that. But I have heard this trope about LSIs getting this like serial killer vibes. Um, you know, like they're definitely the type to wear those combat boots. This is totally stereotypical, but whatever. Definitely the type to wear those combat boots. Like they've got a very particular style about them. Like probably those what do you call them? You know those jackets that have like stripes on them, like so like let's say it's red. It's like a lumberjack jacket. It's like red, and then it has these blue stripes, and they kind of overlap, and on the part where the blue stripes overlap, it's like a darker square. Yeah, that kind of thing. Like those kinds of clothes are like totally LSI-ish, which I'm sorry, this is just a aesthetic thing I've noticed, and it doesn't necessarily speak to the type. But I I've noticed this in quite a bit of them, and I've heard like this like trope about like from LSIs telling me that they get told they're like serial killers all the time, that they have serial killer energy, right? Now, obviously, like the boss that I was talking about, he's in charge, he's like owns the company. So like in that case, it's not like he has serial killer vibes. He still like is a very noticeable kind of impact on the environment. So yeah, it's hard to explain, but yeah, they're very intense people. I mean, I would say that's a big part of LSIs is that intensity, and SEs too, SE types too, like SLEs are pretty intense as well. But there's just LSIs like a quiet, slamming intensity that I can't. It's really difficult to explain, but that's a very central to who they are. Another thing I want to get into with this type, that I haven't gotten into yet, is that they're very they can be very like that NI can really make them focused on things like metaphysical type of things. And the way I'm going to try to put this correctly. That metaphysical focus is probably going to be something that they will have. But it's going to be very structured, more structured and more focused on like how it fits into like them or what they're like trying to accomplish. I think that for them it's often been about like subconscious material, about like how like I've just noticed that LSIs are interested in things like some of them are anyways. They're interested in spirituality to a degree. I have a friend who's into like alchemical stuff, like alchemical psychology, things like that, about the different like stages of like change within one's mind and the different alchemical stages and what those represent and how they arise and things like that. And so because of that, LSIs and I get along pretty well. We like to talk about that kind of thing. IEI LSI activator relationship. So that is something that we kind of get along with. One thing I've noticed with them is that I'll go on and on and on about these NI examples, like these metaphors and things like that. That, like, let's say I have an idea and I'm chasing this idea, but there's like I just keep getting these different images of like how this idea presents itself in reality. So I have all these examples. For me, I'm more interested in the examples. Like, look, this is where it's happening. It's happening here. It's happening there. It's happening there. It's happening here. This is like a constant truth in reality, right? Whereas what I've noticed with LSIs, they get really wrapped up in the details. I used an example of a garden, and then I used like 5 other examples, and my LSI friend took the one garden example, and he started like talking about like how one runs a garden. Like how do you operate a garden? Like what are the things that you need to do? What are the problems that you'll run into when you operate that garden? And like I wasn't even talking about all that. I was just talking about like, in the same way that if you were to be running a garden and you had this problem, you have to do this kind of thing. You also see this in other places. Like I wasn't so focused on the garden, whereas he was structuring a damn garden, you know? And I've seen like, for them, they'll start talking TI information to me, and I'll be honest, I zone out and I have to try to focus. And I remember one of my friends came up with this example. He was trying to explain this concept in regard to a train. And he was talking about all the parts of a train, right? Like he was telling me all the different pieces of a train, all the different parts, and like you can kind of see them laid out on the map. You can actually get the parts. You can look at them. Basically, he eventually said, but like once you like assemble the train, you throw the coal in there and like burn the coal, then it's a whole different beast, right? So essentially, he was going on and on about the train parts for like the longest time, and I was like, what is he talking about? Like I was like trying to focus because otherwise I was going to zone out, and I was like, I'm going to try to figure out what he's talking about. So I was focusing on his words and I was trying to stay tuned in, and he was going on and on about train parts. I didn't get it, and then like eventually he like got to the part that I did understand, which was like kind of introverted intuition like point that he was making. It was much more grounded. It was much more concrete. But then eventually he got to the point, which was about this like metaphorical analogy, which I understood. I understood that, like, you know, it's different to look at a heap of metal and just look at all these different parts. But then once the parts add up to the whole, and you turn on the car engine, you know, that thing's alive. You know, it comes to life. There's something about these different parts that come to life. And he was using it as an analogy, but I mean, like, he went into the details, so I got really confused. And then, like, eventually he got right back to the point of like of the analogy and the whole thing about like machines coming to life. Um, so yeah, that's I think that's a point. I don't know if I lost anyone there, but that's a point to notice about them, is that they might be kind of seeking for this like spiritual meaning, seeking for this like symbolic meaning. The LSIs can be really intense and symbolic too. Um, and they'll probably appreciate symbols in a way that like IEIs don't necessarily. I think like I don't know. I'm not gonna get into that. It's not very informed. Um, I guess like, well, no, it is. So LSIs are pretty focused on like symbols and religion and things like that. I think they're very focused on that kind of thing. Like for me, I look at a symbol, I look at a religion, I look at that information. My introverted intuition just picks up on it. I get the main concept, I get what they're trying to talk about. And the symbol or the like the image or whatever or the story is just trying to allude to something that is present throughout everything. So that's my view, right? LSIs really get wrapped up in the symbols and the stories. I mean, I know of LSIs that they love mythology. They love like getting into the nuance of mythology of like all these different stories and these different like gods of these different cultures, like Greek gods, Norse gods, etc. Like they get really involved with it. They actually can tell these stories about them. Whereas like for myself, like I can talk about them to a degree, use them as examples, but I'm not really interested in like the story itself because I get what the story's trying to allude to, but like so that's not really my focus. Whereas I've noticed with them, they're like NI seeking, they will be really interested in symbols and like archetypes and like mythological like gods and stories and things like that, and like even maybe like content from the Bible, like that's something that is I've noticed with them is pretty that's it's much more grounded in I, you know? Like all of this stuff is in I, but it's not like in I kind of like would more so just be like, well, these are examples that portray the meaning, right? Whereas like the LSI is really encapsulated with like the examples. So they get all the details of the example and each detail speaks to the meaning, and like they're very much more detail focused. So yeah, that's something I've noticed with them. So their like fascination with symbols is intense. And I also watched this show where there was an LSI character and he was like talking about the phase of the moon and he was all like intense, and it's like, whoa, like what are you doing? Like I was like, I don't even know what the phases of the moon necessarily mean, but like apparently there's a meaning, and he was like talking about it in the show, but it was a dumb show. Alrighty. So that concludes like TI, SE, SI, NI, FE. So for a LSI, one of the things that they get from an EIE is kind of like EIE kind of acts as a prototype for the LSI. So what I mean by that is an LSI makes a system, right? They establish law. And then like the EIE, they're just upset and they have no structure to why they're upset. Like EIE is just focused on emotion, expression. And so for them, they're just going to be expressing, and there's not going to be like, they won't be able to like really consolidate on like understanding what upsets them if they're upset, but they'll just be upset. Like they might like talk about the things that annoy them and how it's ridiculous, but like really giving it logical structure is not going to be something that they're going to be very good at. Now for LSIs, this is helpful to have the EIE around to a degree, because the EIE, let's say they're confined to a set of principles, or the LSI kind of lays down this law. EIE is going to act as a human prototype, which they're going to be expressing the things that irritate them, the things that are like that they think are wrong, the things that like affect them emotionally, and they're just gonna be very expressive, and all of that expression is gonna be like if either the LSI is gonna shut them down and be like, this is irrational, like no, like you make no sense, or they're gonna be receptive to the information and be like, I see what you're saying. Like they're gonna kind of start to structure like what the person's upset about and how it makes sense. And so that's gonna be really informative for an LSI. That's pretty big for them. And obviously, like LSIs aren't going to be very good at impacting like an emotional atmosphere, creating or setting a mood. This is something that they're not very good at. They're pretty like structured, pretty intense, but they're definitely not like great at creating or setting a mood or like getting people excited about things. That's like they would want someone to create that atmosphere for them where people would be interested in like an LSI loves structuring things, but they love to have like a structured like organization in a way, but they need the EIE to kind of bring everyone together and get everyone excited about it. So yeah, that's a big part of them. They're also not going to be very good with relationships. It's going to be very black and white. I've noticed this a lot with LSIs. That role FI is pretty key to that. Their sense of like who's close to them and who's not is pretty black and white. Yeah. Like I think obviously like LSIs are there's gonna be like a little bit of an anxiousness in regard to these kinds of things. Like I feel like that relational stuff is difficult for them to manage, and they'll probably need like help or yeah, with that kind of thing. Which I've actually helped LSIs with that sort of thing quite a bit. I've had LSIs reach out and talk to me about some of their like emotional concerns and like things in regards to like relationships and stuff like that, and I've always been happy to help. There's not like a sense of calmness or nonchalance. Like it is, they don't know what they are. They don't really want to like. It'll either be straightforward and they'll be like, look, because remember they're very straightforward logical types, so they either might be like, this is not a relationship, this is what we are, like very clearly defined. But like forming a relationship is a much more like, it's not a structured thing, it's a very you got to traverse it slowly, you got to allow things to happen. Like forming a relationship is not something that's so clear cut. It might make an LSI more comfortable to like write up a contract. I mean, SLE too, but yeah, so that's not going to be something they're like super comfortable with, but they will be better at it than they are with like creating an emotional affect, sense of relations. Also, there's a movie called Equilibrium. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I really do think of Equilibrium as a LSI society. like if you watch the movie, that movie is like if you were to imagine an LSI as like a societal structure. Um, yeah, it's pretty intense. But in the movie, the whole thing's about like removing emotion, like the, which that's not necessarily LSIs like want the emotion. Um, but that society is like they like take injections to like remove emotions. Really good movie. I highly recommend it. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty central to them. Uh, we have FI, FE, um, NI, NE. I mean, I already kind of talked about NE earlier. They're not going to be very good at like surveying alternatives. And this is why the EIE is going to be like helpful to them. The EIE is going to be more interested in taking all of those possibilities and bringing them back, condensing them down back to NI, to the things that are important. LSI, they're going to take a lot of information as is. That's why they're going to really want you to clarify surveying alternatives, options. Like this is not something they are very good at. They want the thing that matters the most. They want to narrow down on the most important thing. Exploring their options and possibilities is not going to be something that they're going to like be very interested in. So yeah, we're very good at, like surveying alternatives, perspectives, possibilities. Like they're very opinionated and very strong opinionated. Like LSIs will be very intense and have very strong, kind of narrow-minded opinions. I've seen them be open-minded. It's not that they're always going to be narrow-minded, but I've just noticed that they have a very set way that they think is the right way, and if you try challenging it, they're probably not going to be open to it. Remember, extrovert intuition is not very good. They're going to be narrowing it down. So that is big part of the LSI. So yeah, I think that just about covers it. I actually really enjoyed making this video on the LSI. It's a type I really like. Um, but yeah, if you are interested in getting typed yourself, you can go down to the description below. I have a um, scheduling application that you can go on there and schedule a time with me. Also, we have a Discord family. You can go ahead and go in the description below. You can talk with me, a few other people on the server about Socionics. If you're new, that'd be a great place to learn. But yeah, make sure to like the video. It really does help me. Support your local Socionics community, and make sure to subscribe. I really appreciate that as well. That really helps the channel. So, alrighty. You guys enjoy your day. I appreciate it. Till next time. Peace.